Hello and welcome to the 381st episode of the Crate and Crowbar, a podcast about PC gaming. We're recording this on the evening of September the 22nd. I'm newly 46 years old.
Oh, Jesus.
It's really bad. Yeah, thanks, man. I'm also Alex Wiltshire, and tonight I'm joined by, you're going to love this. We've got the return of Marsh Davies.
Hello.
Woo!
And who's a person who's not been with us for quite a few weeks now. It's only Tom Francis.
Woo! I mean, hello.
It's a dream, really, isn't it? I keep pinching myself.
All right, you've laid it on so thick it now kind of feels a bit pointed.
I just missed you both, that's all.
Oh, thanks, man.
Oh.
Just imagine the fresh takes we're going to get tonight.
Oh, good God.
Talking of takes, that was a funny noise from my headphones. And also, Tom, you had something to share about a game that I've forgotten the name of, and we talked before the pod about the fact that we're finding it really hard to remember the name of this game.
I already got the name wrong, like in between thinking of it and then saying we should talk about it. So Firaxis are making a Marvel-themed XCOM-like game, and it is called Midnight Suns. It's not called Golden Suns, which we think might be the name of a fascist group, but they are golden. It was revealed a while back, but we haven't mentioned it on the pod yet. And it's got a sort of somewhat mixed reaction, probably from the XCOM hardcore, because it has cards in it. And so a lot of people are worried about, is it going to be a collectible card game? Is it going to be microtransactions and all this stuff? I think they've made some noises against that direction. But even so, there's sort of it's a pretty big departure from how XCOM works, where everything is sort of, what your options are going to be next turn as well as this turn. And I think the cool thing about it is that it seems to go big into knockback stuff. So you are slamming people across the battlefield, and it's got quite a sort of like fine-grained system for positioning yourself and angling how you're going to slam someone into a certain piece of furniture. And you can sort of move around and consider what location to move to and see a preview of like who you'll catch in the blast of shrapnel when you do this big cone area effect attack and that kind of stuff, and plan out exactly how to sort of position that. And I really like that. And
that is very superhero, actually, given that superhero fights are essentially throwing each other into furniture and walls.
Yeah, exactly. I'm a big fan of knockback in general, but it's especially a good fit here. And the effects for it just look really good. It looks really like has a lot of impact, and seems like it feels good. The cards thing, I think it's more about what are the problems with like designing abilities for a game like this, because I am designing abilities for a game like this myself, is you think of a cool idea and then you're like, well, why wouldn't they just do that every turn? And one way to do that is to make it cost mana, and you've got a certain amount of mana, but then it becomes like, well, why don't they do this every time they have mana? And so cards, I think, are probably a way around that problem where
just saying arbitrarily you can't have it.
Yeah, just you'll get it when you get it, and you'll be happy with it. I mean, that is how like Slay the Spire and Monster Train work. There are obviously they're very carefully balanced games, but there are still cards that are just fucking brilliant. And if you got them every turn, the game would just be boring. And so it's about trying to craft your deck in such a way that those are going to come up at the right time. But it's also got some other mechanics around that, where like you're building some kind of, I don't know, is it hero points or something? And once you've got enough, then you can do some like ultimate abilities. I wasn't clear on whether you can always do that or if you have to wait for the card to come up. But yeah, again, that's another thing that just kind of could add texture to the turns, where like this turn is different to the next turn because on this turn I'm still building up my hero meter, and on the next turn I'll get to unleash it, which I think is probably a good direction. The thing I'm not really excited about is fucking Marvel characters, because I like them. I like the movies, but like stuff that's just sort of those characters, but it's not the movies. There's nothing that I'm interested in there. Like I don't like the movies because of the the source characters, I like the movies because they are usually a very polished, very heavily, what's the word? Like a punch-up pass in script writing, where they've had like 3 different pretty talented writers come in and just find every opportunity for a little joke that will make a moment land. That is what makes those movies entertaining to me. And when you just take those characters and you put them in the hands of, frankly, not that writing team, like the dialogue in the trailers has not been good. It's all really fallen flat for me. And like I say, I have no existing investment in these characters. In fact, I have a sort of anti-investment in these characters where I'd rather hear about a stranger than Doctor Strange. Or who else? It's quite I don't really care about Blade. I don't really care about Captain America. I don't really care about like anyone in this really. And they keep stressing how much of a story-driven thing it is, and how there's going to be hours of cutscenes. And
oh no,
I'm not excited about that part of it.
But don't you want to find out how they get their black and golden suits matching teams?
Oh yeah, that ought to be a good one. Did you guys see this trailer?
Nope.
I managed to miss it as well. I think I was put off by, I was confused by card based. That should have made me want to watch the trailer because, I wanted like a card based turn based, from Firaxis. But I was put off by the Marvel. I'm also utterly uninterested by them. And I think on top of that, actually, I think it's been tainted weirdly by the Destiny-like, Marvel game, Marvel Avengers. Because I haven't played that. And I'm kind of recognizing that it's kind of put this pall over the games, big attempts to make games about, ensemble characters kind of doing stuff. It just, I don't know. Oddly enough, I mean, I don't have anything invested in any of it really. And I'm kind of annoyed with myself for kind of being affected by that really.
Yeah, it's sort of, we're past the era where these were like cheap cash-ins where they just sort of churn them out and hope the name would sell it. Like, it seems like Marvel's Avengers game, whatever it's called, was a major effort. They put a lot of weight behind it, but it's also kind of, from an outsider perspective, my impression is that it felt like a bit of a cynical cash in of just, what if Destiny plus Marvel? Surely that would make money.
And I think that's what I think that was operating fairly deep down was, what if Marvel and turn-based strategy, which I'm not sure is quite the seller, quite the same kind of potential of seller. But, but then actually your description of it being about planning, throwing people into things, and I can see the card thing. I haven't actually played it. Have you played Tights in Fight Space? Fights in Tight. I can't be the first person to have done that.
It's where you wear tights in a boxing ring.
Tights in Fight Play Spaces. Fights in Tight Spaces. Have you played that? Because that is a turn-based game with cards, right?
Yes, I played an early version of it, so I haven't played the one that I think it's fully out now, right?
Yeah, I keep meaning to play it and just haven't got around to it.
Yeah, so I don't take everything I say with a pinch of salt. But I really like the idea, and I was really kind of into it. But at the version I played, at least, if you wanted to move, you had to hope a move card came into your hand. So like really fundamental things were just not doable unless you got the card, and that I felt hamstrung by my deck, by the deal of my of what I got dealt much more. I kind of wanted that to have some basic things I could always do, like you can always move and you can always do a couple of basic things just so that you're never totally screwed. Because I had some turns where I'm just like, well, I just didn't get dealt anything that applies to the situation, so I guess I just get screwed. But that's the kind of thing that they may well have fixed since I last played.
That does feel like a fundamental kind of misstep there.
Yeah, this, certainly it looks like XCOM. Sorry. What the fuck's it called? Midnight Suns. I'm literally looking at those words on my screen and I still can't quite remember it.
Is that a name of some sort of bad group or something? Is that what it is?
We thought
fiction?
that Golden Suns might be, right? Because that's what I misremembered it as first.
Okay.
Yeah, it looks like that does let you at least move without having the right card to move. Like the cards are just about attacks, I think.
It'll be just a two action affair, surely. Move and card.
Yeah.
Move and card.
Have you been enjoying the news of another Disney property / tie-in, gaming related?
Go on.
Quantic Dream, rumored to be making a Star Wars game.
Oh, wow. And you've brought this up. Tell me how you're feeling about this this prospect, Marsh.
Well,
Marsh.
You know, I think if there were two companies in the world who've dealt with the ethical ramifications of full-body digital recreations of actual actors, then, you know, it's a good pairing. In every other way, not a good pairing. I don't know. I don't feel... I'm not as much of a headbanger for Star Wars as Chris is. So I don't feel necessarily that protective of it as a license, but you know, I do wish that Quantic Dream would go away.
Yeah, speaking of a Paul cast over something, like I quite enjoyed what's the Android one, Detroit.
Detroit, yeah.
And I, in general, just like the you know, heavily branching stories, and especially the way that they surface that and let you see the flowchart and, you know, really expose the tell you what percentage of people went your way and other things. I find that really compelling. But all the stories about Quantic Dream and the management there have really put me off ever playing their things again.
Yeah, definitely. There's been sort of news rumbles that just this week actually about as the ongoing problem kind of with its, you know, like culture a few years ago. I mean, that's what's been reported anyway. It's kind of rumbled out. I mean, I haven't played Detroit, but I thought Beyond Two Souls was terrible. I think I've grumbled about it before. I don't know. I'm not going to grumble about it before, but the one before that, Heavy Rain, made me angry like no game has ever made me angry, because I actually got really kind of sucked into it. And I think that it was just such a dishonest game with its internal structure and the way it told its story. Oh, so angry. I'll tell you that sometime.
I got that free with Detroit, I think. Somehow I just ended up with owning it. Or maybe it was just mega cheap and I bought it or something, because I was curious about it. And I tried it, and I was already finding it quite irritating from the first few scenes. And then I got as far as trying to brush my teeth, and I realized what I actually had to do to brush my teeth. And I was like, oh, fuck this. Like, I actually failed brushing my teeth. And I was like, I'm not going to reattempt brushing my teeth. That's not where I am in my life. I'm done.
Yeah, that was a special time in games where new interaction techniques were like, wow, this is exciting. This is pushing the boundaries.
I don't think it was, though. I think that's that was so aggravating about the whole hoo-ha about Quantic Dream, is that they rocked up sort of with the kind of sense that they were in some way saving gaming from itself. And, you know, and the two ways they introduced that was narrative and QTEs, both of which were like, I mean, had been around for a long time, but also there had been many better narratives than had been attempted by Quantic Dream, who couldn't even tell like a sub Midsummer Murders pot boiler properly. It was, I don't know, a nightmarish moment of the games industry sort of slavishly following their PR line and clapping along like they were trained SEALs rather than interrogating their failures.
So I'm looking forward to Star Wars then. Actually, I'm quite looking forward to this now.
But which beloved Star Wars character are we going to see fully naked in the shower?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hopefully Darth Maul.
Is it black or red?
It's both.
It's horny. We get. I do remember with when Heavy Rain came out, someone, I think the code that we were sent for review, or it might have been a preview, but it's probably the review, had a debug mode in it. And it had a free cam in the debug mode, and there was an afternoon where the shower was for the main character Ethan. Was he called Ethan? He's something like Ethan, wasn't it? It's the kind of game where there's going to be a male character.
They're all
called
Ethans.
Ethan. Yes. And yeah, he was never shown in the game, but he was fully modelled with a winky and balls. very delighted about that. Hey, Marsh, what
Hello.
you been playing?
I've been playing Webbed, Alex.
Oh,
Webbed,
nice.
which is an absolute delightful physics puzzler platformer that I can still play on my somewhat potato of a rig here. And I've just fallen in love with it. It's really a tremendous. It's not that kind of ambitious or elaborate as kind of structurally as a game. It's just a 2D platformer, but the mechanics of being a spider, bounding around and webbing onto things, are just so beautifully recognized that it's just a real pleasure just to muck around in for ages. To the extent that I've actually almost got all of the achievements in it, which is something I never do in games, just because I just enjoyed spending time there.
This is a very, like, Tom will love this game, actually.
Yeah.
Because
I mean, it's grappling hook adjacent, isn't it?
It's very grappling hook adjacent. Yeah, I'm really interested. I'd love you to play it so you can actually properly break down all of the sort of small affordances that they've given that mechanic behind the scenes. Because from my perspective, I can tell that it feels really good, but I don't know exactly how they've tweaked the amount of air control you have, or the kind of feeling of elasticity as you kind of grapple onto something. Because I think unlike floating point, correct me if I'm wrong, you don't in floating point you don't gain momentum just by grappling onto something. Is that right? Like in this, you're pulled towards your grapple point the second you fire a web.
In floating point, not automatically. It's like when you click the mouse button while you're holding it, you're pulling the rope in, and that gives you momentum in the swing direction as well. Just as a natural consequence of the physics. And if you let go of the mouse, then your rope stops retracting. So you can do just a swing.
This feels very intuitive to me, even though actually on that basis you have less control, because as soon as you sling out a web, rather than it just sort of it doesn't just anchor you to a fulcrum, it also draws you towards it. And I think there is also like an acceleration on the rate at which you're drawn towards it for the longer that you hold. But for some reason, whatever, magic has gone behind the scenes, that feels instantly intuitive. And you can do really complex things from the off, where you're, hitting an overhanging branch and slingshotting yourself past it and then twirling in midair and then webbing back over the branch to sort of zigzag up the canopy. It feels really good. And the animation is really gorgeous as well. There's a thing where if you sort of switch direction midair, your little pixel art spider does this sort of lateral barrel roll where all his legs, or her legs rather, sort of spin around. It looks gorgeous. And it's just
running from left to right. It looks really good. Like, it's beautiful. Feels lovely. Just running, scuffling along the ground.
Yeah, I'm not generally, a big spider guy, but it's really kind of endeared me to spiders. And yeah, it's good. It's really nice. And the other thing about it is that it's not just the whole web slinging thing isn't just for a movement system. It's also a sort of construction kit as well, because you can fire grapple webs with the left mouse button, but you can sort of fire another web with the right mouse button, which allows you to anchor it to two other distant points. So you sort of aim at the first desired anchor point, and then you hold down the right mouse button, and you can drag a web between that and some other point. And you can you do this to do the things that you would expect webs to do, like create platforms for you to scuttle up, or to catch fruit flies, or to actually just web up objects that you want to then lift and move elsewhere. And it also helps you to get to places you couldn't get to. You can sort of fire yourself like the arrow from a bow. So you sort of web across 2 points above you, like the string of a bow, and then grapple up to it, and then twang past it. And it's just fantastic.
Oh, wow.
It just feels really nice. For a large section of the game, which was actually the first section I explored out of the three sort of main possible directions you can go at the start, you're basically working out how to lift and transport heavy objects by suspending them in webs, or attaching them to things that you can move with levers, which, you're in an ant's nest. And of course, ants are replete with mechanisms like levers. And it's really, it's sort of it is a little bit finicky because you're at the mercy of this slightly fickle physics system. But on the whole, I think it's just a really cool use of the same mechanics that they use and exploit for movement. They do sort of run out of ways to expand on those puzzles. And the other two sections of the game sort of almost completely abandon puzzling, weirdly, in favor of just platforming, which is sort of a surprise, especially if you did the puzzly part first, because then, I expected it to be all of that, and suddenly it's no more puzzles. It's just moving from screen to screen in elegant ways. I was kind of sort of like disappointed by that at first, but then I got better and better at sort of like slinging myself around, and, the movement mechanics sort of made up for it. And it's not at all challenging. Like the platforming isn't hard in itself, and also there's a hugely forgiving respawn system where you just pop back to whatever ledge you just threw yourself off, which I wholeheartedly appreciate because I'm shit at games. Yeah. Well, sorry, what were you going to say, Tom?
I'm really curious to see how the elasticity feels, because I remember when I was trying to make a grappling hook game, I looked into Unity assets that would just have a rope system already built that I could use, and I rejected all of them because all of them had some kind of elasticity in them, and I didn't want any for the game I was making, because I was trying to think about preserving momentum, where, I mean, it sounds like Webbed is not really about sort of grappling onto something and then doing a long arcing swing and sort of keeping it going, more about sort of using it as a brief thing to propel you somewhere. And if you have elasticity on that, the curve that you describe is quite bouncy and jiggly and weird. And I wanted it to be nice and smooth. Floating Point ended up being about describing these arcs in space, and we give you a trail so that you can kind of see the patterns you're making. And those only look good if there's zero elasticity. And every rope system I tried had some kind of give in it, and so I ended up just writing my own because it was the only way I could find to just have no elasticity whatsoever. But it is, like, bouncy stuff is fun. It's the counterpoint to that.
Yeah.
You're missing out on quite an important thing though, Martian.
What's that? It's
got a laser.
Oh yeah.
What?
Yeah. Oh yeah, well, obviously it's got a laser. You are a spider, after all. And that's. I also didn't mention the skateboarding section.
I did know about the skateboarding.
The laser is obviously presumably an afterthought that they added so that you can snip cables that you've created, so that you don't end up with just an unmanageable mess of webbing.
Oh right.
There's no real combat in the game. The lasers are used aggressively, I think, at just one point in the entire game, but you don't fight anything. You can eat fruit flies, but that's the extent of your role as a predator of the undergrowth. It's quite cute. I do wish it had like a mega web though, because sometimes when you're trying to lift like a heavy object, you just have to fire like 50 webs.
I was going to ask you, because this is the thing I've stumbled on. Like, that has been my solution too. And I keep thinking there must be a better solution to raising heavy things in the air with webs. And I don't know what it is.
Yeah. I mean, there's quite a lot of sort of like, what's the phrase? Something of life, they say in like software design, care of life decisions,
quality of life,
quality of life,
quality of life. There you go. Well, that was so hard for me to reach. Yeah, there was quite a lot of quality of life things that I think could be finessed in the game. Like, I don't think it's made up. It's not just like a single contiguous space. It's made up of discrete sort of level chunks, and how those levels connect together is not consistent for one thing, but also not necessarily directly consistent with how they're marked on the map that you get. And if you want to find everything, it just becomes quite frustrating. I mean, you can certain level chunks you can transition between by falling out of the bottom of one and into the top of another. Other times it'll just kill you doing that. And that feels like, I mean, whether they could change that easily, I don't imagine, but they could probably show you on the map the different connections between the different level chunks. And maybe even, some sort of fast travel, because by the time you're just trying to hoover up achievements, it feels a little laborious to go from, one end of the entire environment to another just to find the fruit fly that you've missed. But yeah, in general, I just, it's a fantastic game. Really nice. Exactly the size of game that I wanted to play at this moment in time as well.
It's made in Game Maker as well.
Is it?
Being the second Tom adjacent thing.
That's awesome.
And I mean, it doesn't. It does. I mean, this is an indictment of. I mean, it's not an indictment of Game Maker at all. But in the same way that Heat Signature, you kind of go, "What? This was made in Game Maker." This feels a bit like that as well, because it feels so refined and of itself. It feels like it's unique. Built specifically for purpose.
Right. Yeah. Game Maker's pretty good.
It is good.
I remember hearing that, I don't know if this is one particular kind of spider or spiders in general, but if they find an abandoned web, they'll move into it, but then they'll also completely deconstruct it and rebuild a new one in the same place. Which makes me, I love to imagine them like electricians, like every electrician I ever had in the UK would take a look at what the last guy had done and be like, no, they've made a complete pig's ear of this. I'm going to have all of this out, start again. Just imagine little spiders going around like, you call these concentric? What are you thinking? This is nonsense. This is all going to have to come down.
I don't know if the particular kind of spider in this actually makes webs in reality. I think it's because it's a jumping spider, isn't it? Don't they eat other spiders? So they don't necessarily need webs to catch.
Well, a web could be good for that too. They wait for the spider to move in as he's renovating, pounce.
I think that I don't think it's necessarily good they've glossed over the violent side of spiders in this. I'm all for supporting spiders. I love spiders, but
Have you guys read Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky?
No.
It's a really, really good sci-fi novel. The premise is that the last surviving humans have attempted to recreate evolution on another planet by seeding it with Earth life forms and then spreading a sort of virus which accelerates the development of the species along certain evolutionary lines. But it goes slightly right because all the monkeys burn up in orbit and leaving spiders to fill the gap. And the book is sequel is all just sort of about finding empathy really with creatures that are superficially horrific and don't necessarily think like us at all. But it's about exploring the ways that other creatures think, and the sequels do that in other different ways as well. Really good
cool.
books. Yeah,
nice.
Nothing to do with this apart from the spiders, but I thought I'd plug it. What have you been playing, Alex?
Been playing a Warham computer game called Battlesector, which is the blandest name, the very blandest name. Again,
Battlefield was taken.
Yeah. And it kind of looks a bit bland as well. But this is it's a very good Warham turn-based strategy in the sense that I think it really captures the table-based turn-based strategy without actually slavishly following any of the full Warhammer 40,000 rule set or anything like that. But it just captures the way that you think on the tabletop and what the units do and what armies, how they work and that kind of thing. And I've been having a pretty good time with it. It's by Slytherin, and it has a story mode. One of the things I like about it is that it has spent all of its reasonably small budget. I imagine it's a polished game, and they spent its budget in just the right places. So, for example, it doesn't have massive great cutscenes all over the place and during the story telling bits and so on. It's just one really good piece of Warham art painted with epic scenes of war, with a good sort of British kind of Warham man sort of doing Warham words kind of over the top of it. Talking about kind of duty and stuff like that and how bad Tyrannid bugs are and that kind of thing. And it's just, those two, that art and that voiceover are done really well, and they spent their money very well. They haven't tried to stretch it and do something any more ambitious than that. And I really appreciate that. And I think that stretches to the strategy as well. I mean, this is really quite difficult to kind of isolate anything particularly novel about its turn-based strategy. It's a turn-based strategy in which you have your turn and the enemy has its turn. The enemy in this are Tyranids, and if you're playing the campaign anyway, and the goodies, what you are playing are Blood Angel Space Marines. In multiplayer, you can, opponents can be the Tyranids, but in this campaign, you only play as the Blood Angels. And you have two actions you can make on a turn. It's just, pretty basic stuff, but somehow it captures like some of the scale of Warhammer, in the sense that a unit in this game is a kind of cohort of soldiers, of Space Marines. So, and I think they pretty much follow the number of models that would be in a squad in a unit in the tabletop game as well. And when they fire, they shoot loads and loads of bullets. And the Tyranids are in kind of swarms of 10, 20 of them in a unit. And so when you do a simple single attack against a unit, you just see a lot of gratifying death every time. But the amount of health that's gone down of the unit is kind of what you'd expect of a turn-based game. Things generally have survival rates of what you'd expect in most games. If you use an effective weapon, you might be able to wipe out a squad. Others, you'll just whittle them down. And that, but because of the level of kind of epic sort of killing and blood that occurs, it's just really satisfying every time.
Yeah.
And, which means that, and also they've put loads of attention into the way that kind of the bullets work. So if you've got a group of intercessors are the pretty standard Space Marines. They've got bolt rifles. They are, jack of all trades, just sort of not particularly good at anything, but effective in a lot of things. And even these which would in most turn-based strategies not be that exciting to fling around. It's a game in which you can engineer situations where they are good. There are abilities you can pop on them, which enhance their abilities. It's very interested, this game, in range. Like your weapons have specific ranges at which they are most potent, or at least most likely to hit their targets. And in this, it does render, it does calculate line of sight stuff. So you'll see your bullets actually striking bits of scenery and things. And I'm sure, well, it is all calculated on probabilities, but it shows you stuff that's happening, and it usually, the percentages usually really very much reflect what's going on. If you're shooting uphill, for example, or whether there's a wall nearby and that kind of thing, things just seem to make a lot of sense, very physicalized, even though it's all about stats. And that's been really good as well. Units, and there's things like aggressors. Aggressors are these kind of particularly rotund Space Marines with these kind of massive gauntlets in which they're a very close range, very, very fast shooting machine guns. And they are so good when you can use them effectively. And, and you'll find, I've found myself just naturally getting them to the front. They've got various abilities, which means that they can reduce, avoid much damage, and they have more health points and that kind of thing. But you get them into close range and they mince through a lot of stuff. And that's just, it just feels so good. And the units that you get are kind of, they've all got very good, clearly defined roles. Some of them are really good movement because they are vehicles and they zoom around scouting for you, and they can hold their own in a gunfight. It works really well. The levels are really good as well. They're quite, they are very pre-planned, but they're just rich in setting. So, you'll often, for example, there was one where, you're coming in from the outside into an area of level. You've got to get to this point, which is behind this great big bit of rock through which there is a single square route, or you can go around the edge. In this game, you can't move units through each other, so you get easily jammed up in between stuff, and that's something to consider as well as you move stuff around, and then go into the area. And then there's this kind of temple thing in which you've got to get one particular unit to do something in, and then you've got a great big attack of Tyranids as they're performing that act. And throughout, none of, you're kind of expecting every stage, but it spawns enemies in really interesting ways, often behind you. So you've always got to be looking behind you. It's got line of sight. It's sort of fog of war in it, so that you've got to be looking around. And that's makes the levels interesting to play, because while you are expecting what's going to happen, you also know you've got to be on your guard, and it often just pops enemies out of places where it's interesting to have them. That's a bland thing to say.
Awesome.
It was good. It was just good.
The thing about making the combat satisfying is good to hear, because as much as I loved Dawn of War, it did kind of feel like, I think Dawn of War was the first Warhammer digital game I'd played, and I had grown up with the figurines and just picturing these battles in my head, and then seeing them Dawn of War, as visually lush as it was and as cool as all the models were, there was a lot of just like two squads standing, spraying fire at each other for quite a long time before anybody died or anything visible really happened.
Yeah, and in this one, you lose, like the health is modeled by each model within a unit. So, like in your intercessors, was it 5 or 10 of them? Can't remember. Anyway, they all have individual health in them. And the one standing at the front will take damage from damage that's coming from that direction. And once a model is gone, they're not going to be contributing their fire to the next tractor will take. So actually, there is, everything kind of makes sense in that way. Like the extent to which you can actually control that, by facing them differently, I wouldn't say I've actually employed or particularly investigated, but I do care about losing individuals in units, because it affects the game. And also, that leads on to a point I'm going to come in later on, actually. But actually not going to it right now, because there are some really weird missteps in this game, because Warhammer is a game in which, the tabletop game is a game in which you paint units, you paint models, you put them on the table, you have so much invested in them, they cost so much money, but then you put hours of painting into them, and you really care when you put it onto the table the first time and your friend just kills it in turn one. You are invested in this fucking thing and it's failed you, and it can be really upsetting. And I was expecting that to pull through to this game. It's particularly, as I said, you're seeing units die, like models die. And I fully expected the first time I lost a full unit, that the game would mark it in some kind of way, or at least, if they were, would they come back half strength, or because the game does actually tally up how many levels you've used a unit in. But it doesn't mark it at all. And in fact, in between levels, you have this interface where you can ostensibly buy new units for your army. And there's a cap, there's a value cap, or is it a number of units cap? I can't remember which, but there's a cap of how many units you can have in your overall army roster that you can pick for the next battle. But none of it costs any money at all. So you can freely delete units out of your army and put new units into your army, and it means nothing other than the fact you've lost this little rosettas that are against their UI. They don't earn XP. They don't earn any battle kind of no other details about them. It's really strange. And it means that everything's actually a lot more weightless than you think. You can actually have your army decimated in a game. You can play really badly, end up winning, and it means absolutely nothing in terms of the campaign, which is odd. It feels like this game would actually want you to invest you in that stuff. And there are lots of ways to play the tabletop game in which, campaigns do have an effect on your overall army, and you are buying and selling stuff, and they are leveling up in some ways as you're kind of using paper and things. It's a really odd thing to leave out. And there are lots of little bits and pieces where, like, you don't know what kind of how many points the army is that you can take into the next level. It's bad enough that you don't really know what the threat is, but when you don't even know how many points your army can be before you actually click, next battle, you then have to come back out of the, back to the main menu in order then to change your army up so that it's the right number of points. It's very odd. It just seems sort of very obvious. I hadn't played it for a couple of weeks actually, and I was kind of thinking, I better check that this stuff is still true. They've only updated it once, and that was back in August, only a couple of weeks after it came out. That hasn't been looked at all. So that's really, really strange. But the fact is that during a battle, you kind of forget all that because you send in your captain, your Space Marine captain, who has a chainsword and a jump pack, and you just jump him into the middle of some enemies and you use your chainsword on them. And, he has 2 attacks and he's slicing through them. It feels so good. Oh man. And then when this, like an exocrine, which is a vast tyrannid kind of 4-legged thing that sort of shoots things out of a sphincter that's kind of like on the front of this horn, on the front of its head. And it's sort of decimating kind of units, and you're terrified about what it's going to do. And then you take it down, and those moments are real good. And I think that's this game. I think the weird missteps they're weird because so much of it's got dead right, and it feels so kind of arbitrary and kind of seem easy to fix. But I recommend it. It is called Battlesector.
Have you played as the Tyranids?
I haven't. You got to play in multiplayer for it.
Can you do skirmish against the AI?
That's a very good point. I haven't even tried. I've just been playing on the campaign. The Tyranids. So the army flavors are that the Blood Angels have a thing which is straight from the kind of the lore of the game called, what's it called? It's called I wrote it down. I'm trying to find it. They have the blood rage. I think it's called Red Thirst. That's it. In the lore. Do you know what this is in the lore?
Nope.
So the dad of the Blood Angels, Sanguinius, Blood Dad Sanguinius, he died 10,000 years before the events of this game. Defending the Emperor against all the bad Chaos Space Marines. Because he was psychically active, his death created such a psychic wave of anguish that 10,000 years later, all of his kind of children, all of his Space Marines, will succumb at some point in their life to the Red Thirst, which sort of, they go crazy. They experience his death in first person in their minds, and go
must
crazy.
Have been a bad one.
And lose control of themselves and go into this kind of bloodlust, trying to kill everything. Anyways, you got to deal with this. And they apparently in the game later on, they start doing this. And in this game, you've got to keep killing stuff. You've got to keep killing stuff to keep this momentum up. And once you fill a gauge, you can make these special actions. The Tyranids, by contrast, have a rendition of what's called synapse. And in the tabletop game, it means that there are certain models which have synapse abilities, and everything within a certain range of them is given extra abilities by being close by them because they're psychically active as well. And in this game, it does that in some way, which is flavorful, simply done, but effective for that. And just another good use of the Warhammer thing.
Yeah, I asked because I like skirmish modes in general, but also B, I'm on the side of the aliens. I don't want to be the Space Marines. I want to kill the Space Marines. I want to coat them in weird acid from my horn sphincter.
Does that mean that whenever you don't relish the idea of every time you select your Space Marines, them shouting things like "always ready, always vigilant," and "we will fall upon them with righteous fury," and "victory for the Bloodblades, victory for Skyfall."
I can't wait to hear that many times. The official blurb does. I just find this like such a bore. Help Sergeant Carlian and his allies purge the Tyranid infestation on Baal Secundus and preserve the honor of the noble Blood Angels. And it's like, I know, like once you actually get into the fiction of Warhammer, you realize that the Empire are the bad guys, or one of the many bad guys, just another bad guy. But all the PR fluff is always just completely sort of straight faced and takes it at face value.
Yeah, I do really struggle with it has these two heads, like the whole Warhammer thing has these very, very two distinct heads where you're invited to see the Space Marines as incredibly honorable men who strive for the good of humanity or future of humanity, and you kind of get behind them for their righteous kind of thing. And also, they're space Nazis. So I don't know,
Yeah,
it's difficult, but good game.
It does look like from the Steam Store's page description, it lists skirmish mode separately from multiplayer. So I assume that does mean there's AI.
It would make sense, and obviously the campaign has that as an AI. So I would be surprised if it wasn't in. I should have investigated, and I failed.
No, it's all right.
Tom.
It does have such a glorious blandness to the name, like Battlesector. I think I see that the subtitle is also Unleash Destruction, which is...
I didn't realise it had a song called.
Fight place, do wars.
Do a war on a place.
Well, talking of doing war in a place...
Wow.
Segue.
Incredible, there was a commonality.
You've been playing Deathloop, haven't you, Tom?
Yep. I mean, arguably it's not really a war, but there sure is a place. This is the new game from Arcane that is set in a time loop and is in some ways very Dishonored and in some ways completely undishonored. So it's still somewhat stealthy, but it has a much greater emphasis on just fucking killing people. Never has a developer listened so hard to a single criticism than Arcane have listened to the people's objections to having to being guilted for killing people in Dishonored. That became sort of the prevalent complaint about Dishonored. And Deathloop has just lent completely in the other direction. Like, fine, okay, we want you to kill everybody. Like, they are all disposable. They will all respawn tomorrow anyway. So, you can murder everybody in the level freely. There are no civilians. Everyone is a combatant. Everyone has a gun. Therefore, they deserves to die. And also, your actual primary objective is to kill just 8 specific people. Like, you must kill them. There's no way to not kill them. They've completely addressed the problem. You don't feel bad about using any gadgets. I did actually notice, the point stands that they are incredibly non-judgmental about killing people in this game, and they kind of want you to do it. There is actually an achievement I just noticed for only killing the visionaries, or the targets that you're actually after, these 8 people. If you only kill the visionary and you get out without killing any other cultists, then there is an achievement for that, but that seems to be just a thing you do once. Like, once you've got the achievement for that, there's no further incentive to ever do it again. Just in general, it's incredibly blasé about human life, and your character gleefully like butchers people with a machete as his standard takedown. And even if you don't have your machete out and you can still do a takedown, and you'll do it with your bare hands, but you still kill them. You still snap their neck and sure they're actually dead. So I have pretty mixed feelings on it, actually, because I think it illustrates pretty clearly why there used to be a distinction between non-lethal and lethal, like why that was an interesting thing to do. Because if you can just kill everybody, there isn't a lot of reason not to. And there is a mission in this. So your goal is to kill all 8 of these visionaries, and there are 4 different regions in the game. They're basically levels. They're large Dishonored levels. But I had a friend who bought this game and was disappointed because he was imagining like a Far Cry kind of open world thing, and it's not that. It is 4 large levels. But each loop, you choose which to visit in which order, and there's just a morning, noon, afternoon, and night phases of the day. And whichever you choose to go first, you're there in the morning, and if you went there in the afternoon, some things might be different. Some places you just can't visit at certain times of day, like you can't visit Fristred Rock in the evening, for example. I don't know if that's actually true, but that kind of thing. Just because they don't have anything for you to do there, so you just can't do it.
Wow.
But the thing to say about it, about the time structure, is that it's not actual time. Like, you can spend as long as you like in each segment, and it won't progress time until you leave the segment or you die. So if there's something if you've got to catch a visionary in the morning, just choose that area first, and you've got him. Like, he can't escape. Time will not progress. There's no time pressure in that sense. And what you're trying to do is sorry. Go ahead.
Can I ask a question about that? Because
yeah.
While the overall time of the day doesn't advance, does time within the level advance in a way which does add pressure? Like, is there a clockwork thing going on within a level at a certain time of day where characters are going to move from one part of it to another, and certain things are going to become unavailable during the course of your playing it?
No, not as far as I've seen. And I have blundered every assassination in some way. Like, because the first thing I thought was, like, if I fire a gun here, does that mean the target's going to hear and leave the level? And no, that's not happened at all. And I've created all the alarms I possibly could. And there are Hitman-like opportunities. So there's a party level that is just a sort of perfect mishmash of the Lady Boyle assassination from Dishonored and a Hitman level, where it's a very large masquerade ball, and the target is wearing the same mask as everyone else, so you don't know who it is. And there are several Hitman-like opportunities where you learn, I won't say what they are, but you learn that the target likes X, and then you know where X is. And so if you somehow sort of bring X to the party, that the target will react to that and no one else will. And so that would be your way of identifying him. But it feels very out of place to me, because Hitman is a game in which you dress up in a disguise, and the Lady Boyle mission in Dishonored, you had an invite. You were wearing a mask yourself, so you could show up. This game, you have no cover. Like, everyone is hostile to you on sight, so you can't go to the party. You have to just like lurk in the rafters and stuff. And so you can technically do these things, but it's kind of like, why? Why don't I just kill them all? Like, there's no penalty for killing people. It's not frowned upon. They'll all respawn tomorrow anyway. And it doesn't seem worth it to try and, because to trigger these opportunities, you really have to kind of go into the crowd, kind of like not literally, but they're very close to the very highly populated areas. And it just seems like a weird fit. It feels like those leads were designed for a Hitman game, and then they made a game where everyone is hostile to you at all times. And actually, I mean, in the bad old days of Hitman, there were quite a lot of missions where everyone's hostile to you the whole time. There wasn't like safe areas. You had to at least get hold of a disguise, and then often even that wasn't very practical. And Hitman, grew on for that. They realized that doesn't work. We should always have, you should always be safe when the level starts, and you should always be able to walk around and scope things out by yourself. That's not to say that level doesn't work. It's just a weird fit. The thing that I keep finding is that so A, you're allowed to kill anybody, but also B, you have guns, and there are some good silence weapons that you get pretty early on. There's one it's handed to you on a plate. There's another one that you get from a certain visionary, and I think everyone I know who's playing this game has happened to go for that visionary first. I think it kind of pushes you in that direction, and it gives you a very good rapid fire silenced weapon. And so I basically just headshot everyone with that forever, because it has Dishonored's level design where there's always a higher layer to every area, every space. There's always a rafter, there's always a lampshade, there's always a little vent line running along near the ceiling that you can blink up to. And from there, if you headshot someone with a silenced weapon, the enemy still don't know where you are, even if they see it happen. They'll go into like a more alert mode where they'll start looking around. And I imagine if you just stay out in the open, continually shooting them, they'd eventually spot you. But it's incredibly easy just to duck behind a corner after that, wait for them to cool down for a second, then come out and do it again. And, I'm getting more and more cocky with that. So I'm killing 3 or 4 of them without hiding, then hiding for a little bit for the rest of them to cool down, and doing that over and over again. And that seems to just work. What I have heard, and I haven't experienced this yet myself, is as you get closer to your to perfecting your run, you're trying to manipulate these visionaries so that they'll be in the right place at the right time, that you can kill all 8 in one run. Because there's only 4 sections of the day, and there are 8 visionaries to kill. Most of them are not together by default. They're all from their own little places. So you have to find ways to get them in the same place at the same time. And apparently after you've killed a visionary, the next segment of the day, the guards will be more aggressive and have new tactics and throw grenades and stuff like that. I don't know if that applies to them spotting you more easily and things like that, but I've heard that's where the difficulty gets layered on. But my problem isn't that it's too easy so much. It's just that there's no reason to vary my tactic. I should always have the silence weapon. I should always sit in the rafters. I should always just snipe people in the head. And it's somewhat satisfying to do that. I remember, so I think Machine Games were involved in this as well. And the Wolfenstein, the recent Wolfenstein games, you could play in a stealthy way for those. And it wasn't interesting, but it was continually satisfying. I could go through the whole game as stealth wherever it would let me, and I'd just do the same thing over and over again, and it always felt good. Deathloop for me pushes the boundary of how repetitive I'm I'm willing to go, because that party I must have spent like an hour and a half cleaning it out, just killing every single person in this stealthy way. Actually, the other thing to say is that if you do screw up, if someone does spot you, then there's no quick save, no quick load. You just have to deal with it. And that sort of, again, feels like in dialogue with the response to Dishonored, which is a lot of people will say, oh, the game's actually much more fun if you roll with your failures and you don't just quick load all the time. And then a lot of other people will say, okay, but I'm still going to quick load all the time, including me. And so, yeah, there's the slow plodding, shoot everyone from the rafters with a silenced weapon thing. And then if you do screw up, there isn't really a reason not to just mow everyone down as they come for you. And the spaces are generous enough to the player that you can always find some nook or cranny that the AI doesn't really know how to, it can't surround you. It can't come in from multiple entrances. And so then they just walk in one by one and you mow them all down with a machine gun. So again, it's kind of a degenerate tactic where you just do the same thing and it basically always works. So that doesn't really feel like rolling with the failures pays off. And both methods just take a long time. The part of it that does work is the sort of investigation process of finding clues and then realizing, oh, what I could do next time is this. And if I do that, these two people will meet together at this place at this time. And then I can go there and kill them both at the same time. And there's a good drip feed of stuff along those lines. I have only, for the longest time, I've just had 5 threads. It keeps track of all the information you've learned in a very, very accessible way, which is nice. I think it's better than Hitman in that way, and it distills everything down to just, here's what you actually need to know, and what's going to happen and where you should go at what time. And I've had 5 of those threads going for a while, and I know there's 8 visionaries, so it was becoming conspicuous that I just don't know anything about the other 3, and I've just now stumbled on some clues for those, so that's going to open up again now, and I'll have 3 more leads to investigate each time I start a loop.
Roughly how long have you played up until now?
Must be at least 6 hours, I think.
Okay.
Something in that region. And I'm still kind of tinkering around. I'm not really going for it yet. I still, like I say, I've only just started getting any clues at all about the other 3 visionaries, so I wouldn't know how to go about killing them yet. That there's a thing, I don't know, that investigation process gets its hooks into you, and it's really fun when you at the end of each day, you kind of know which opportunities you didn't take. You already have some ideas of what you'll do next time. Like, for example, first thing in the morning, there's one place you can go that once you've figured out something there, you can use that place to unlock locations in other locations. So little rooms and passageways in every other area in the game. And so if you want to access any of those, you must go to that place in the morning. But there's also a target that can only be hit in the morning. And so you can't do both of those things in one run. And so last run, I did the unlock these areas thing. And so when I played last night, I was really excited to start a new day and go to the visionary in the morning, who I had tried to kill her before, and I was under equipped and I didn't know how gas worked, and so I died. And this time I have much better equipment and I know what I'm doing more. And I also found a whole new route to get to her, which was cool, but also not super well supported. So she's in a big hangar, and I found a way to get up to the roof of the hangar, possibly because of new abilities I have. I can't remember what abilities I had the first time I did this. And kind of picked people off through the roof. Like, it's a big corrugated iron roof, and there's skylights that have been like covered up with bits of corrugated metal that is not quite flush with the frame, so there's little gaps, and so you can peer in through those. And I was trying to kill people through those. Although when I first did that, like, the level didn't load inside. It was sort of like this weird half level where everything was in the low level of detail, and it seemed like it didn't expect me to go there, to be there and to have a line of sight at this point. But then that seemed to resolve itself, and I was able to just pick off a bunch of enemies. And then at one point, I just kind of died from doing that. And I think I was like, this is one that had like a pane of glass in it, and I'd broken that. And I think like a piece of glass had got like wedged between me and the roof, and I think just physics killed me. It just like couldn't quite deal with some of the geometry. So yeah, sometimes I feel like I'm doing the arcane thing, and like I'm supposed to be finding sneaky ways and getting up as high as possible and doing it. And other times it feels like the game wasn't ready for me to do that. It didn't know I would be here and can't handle it that well.
I'm interested to hear you say that the whole clue gathering information game stuff has got its hooks in you, because I'm really struggling with that, and that's the part of the game I thought would, on Arcane's previous history, be the strongest suit for them. But like, I'm finding a lot of the information gathering stuff feels pretty arbitrary, to the extent that like Cole seems to pick up clues in levels that I just had no conscious awareness that I had imbibed. Like, I don't know if that's just like a bug, like the information is unlocking prematurely, but I suspect the game was written by people who didn't successfully sort of put themselves in the shoes of a naive player to some extent. Like, they throw loads and loads of jargon at you about the sort of the sci-fi terminology and abstract concepts. I've heard the word Aeon like twice, as far as I know, but Cole has basically compiled a dossier on this organization. I didn't even know it was an organization. Like, there's weird stuff like it flags up which visionaries are in which place in the menu that you return to between missions. And it does it with a headshot, but it doesn't say who they are anywhere. And like, I don't know what these people look like. I'm a new player. Like, I mean,
in Cole's hand, I think there are pictures of them and descriptions of them in Cole's hideout.
Yes, which you don't have access to when you're in the interstitial menu between missions.
I see.
So I'd need to do a mission, go into there, screenshot it, Alt tab to that. I mean, I don't, it's just stuff like that. I feel it's not just me. I feel like this stuff it's difficult to.
No. It's not. It's no Outer Wilds and it's no Obra Dinn on that scale, because it's trying to be a whole Dishonored game as well as that. And yeah, I have found some of that stuff disappointing, where the information I get is just a combination to a safe, and then inside that safe there's just a password, and that's a password to a door that opens another thing that just gives me a combination. It does feel a lot of these things are just quite dry. It's just like, and that's like
the reason for that is that they can't do the normal world building that they do, because there is always a time pressure in these levels, because you might be invaded by somebody, so you can't provide Cole with the means to sort of distract himself too much with reading huge amounts of lore.
So I've turned off multiplayer invasions because it fucking sucked. On both sides of it, I tried invading and I tried being invaded, and both times I was immediately killed over and over again with no understanding of what happened, or no understanding of what I could have done differently. So I've turned multiplayer invasions off. You still get AI invasions, but I found AI Juliana is very easy to deal with. It hasn't been a problem at all. The only time it was, well, this was still easy to deal with, but one time she just kind of broke. I found her, it was in the party level, and I was being very stealthy, so I was really worried about running into her, because I was like, I don't want to have a loud firefight right now. And I saw her on a balcony, and I was like, shit. So I headshotted her with my silenced pistol, and nothing happened. Emptied a whole clip into her, nothing happened. Walked over, she's just frozen in space, and she's immaterial, can't be interacted with or anything. So I was like, okay, I guess you're staying there. And I cleared out the entire level that time, because I was I didn't find the visionary early on, and so I was there for ages. That was her. There wasn't another Juliana somewhere. I thought it might be like an ability she has, because I know like she can switch identities with guards. So maybe she'd switch identity with guards. Maybe she had, but she wasn't anywhere else either. So she never attacked me, and I didn't kill her. But yeah, I think the part I'm liking about that is not so much the clues themselves, but the strategy of, okay, well, if this is true and that is true, then the way I exploit this information is to do this. Like, I want these. It's getting your ducks in a row. It's figuring out that, okay, I can make this happen, but does that fit with the other part of my plan, which is to do this and this? And if those two things are happening at the same time of day, I can't do both. And so there's kind of a puzzle there to unpick, and I'm enjoying that process.
Yeah, I'm getting more into it now that the missions have got more substantial. I think it suffers. The opening, I think, is a pretty terrible onboarding experience, both for the mechanics of the game, which are just unnecessarily convoluted, I think, with its system of upgrades and exactly how the looping works. It really makes a meal of explaining that stuff. But also, I think because in the opening, it's really stop-start. You're constantly being interrupted by tutorial prompts, for one thing. Even the UI has a tutorial, which is it's telling that is necessary. But you're shunted into a level. You spend maybe 2 to 5 minutes going somewhere, and then you complete your objective, which is just, I picked up a note, and then you're like, oh yeah, you got to leave now. Usually by the way you came in, and it just feels incredibly sort of. The thing you were interested in was this level and getting to explore it. And although you can do that, the instruction is for you to leave. And I think now that it's sort of more at ease with its premise, and it is allowing me to complete lengthier objectives, like I've just taken out my first visionary, it feels much more kind of rewarding in an exploratory way. I still think, though, that I mean, it's funny that this is obviously a reaction, exactly as you say, to the criticism of Dishonored, where it was discouraging you to kill people, but it provided you with this amazing toolset to kill people. I really think they should make games where you don't kill people at all. That was my problem with Prey, is that it was a fantastic space to explore, and I actually found all of the combat in Prey to be deeply irksome and not at all interesting. And in this, I am enjoying the combat, but the spaces that Arcane builds are just so beautiful and rich and really kind of thoughtfully designed as spaces in which people would live and work. And yet all you can do in these spaces is kill people in this game. And yeah, there are notes you can read and there are voice files you can play as per other games, but there's so much less of that. And I think because of the threat of invasion means you can't really sort of just absorb any of the world they've built in the same kind of luxurious way that you could do in previous games.
I don't think there's as much to the world. And it's certainly not like Karnaca or something in Dishonored, Dishonored 2, or Dunwall, Dishonored 1. Like this isn't a place with a history. I think, it's wanting you to ask, like, this place doesn't have a history. What the heck's going on, But I don't think I'm not finding it anything like as interesting as Dishonored's world.
It's quite, it sort of does have a history, but it's mostly a very recent history. And it's also quite a sort of corporate / military history. It's just like, here, this organization moved in, then this organization moved in, and it's being exploited in this way.
Yeah, it's not a culture. Like I think the other games kind of are interested. They want you to immerse yourself in a culture, and this doesn't. It wants you to immerse yourself in a mystery, and I think that's cool. That's fine. But I suppose I'm just pointing out that I think it's trying to do something different than those other Arcane games.
Do love the voice performances though. They're really up there, I think. Cole is great, and he has to be because you spend so much time with him. But the performances just are really dynamic. It changes pitch and pace all the time, and really sort of keeps you awake and paying attention to what he's saying. I think that's a really characterful performance. I also like Juliana a lot as well, and I think it's an impressive writing feat that they have her be a hectoring antagonist. Yeah. But unlike most hectoring antagonists, you don't grind your teeth every time she's poking you. And I think that is a delicate balance that they have succeeded at.
I think the thing you were saying about wanting the non-violent version of this, I think that's partly what was bothering me on the party level was I could see this beautiful Hitman mission had been set up for me, and I just thought it's kind of a shame that all I can do is just shoot everyone in the head. Like there aren't Hitman affordances, there aren't even Dishonored 1 affordances. It's just all I've got is a gun and their heads.
That was I was reading something by I think it's by Jeremy Peel on Rock Paper Shotgun about some of the he's been doing some invasions or experiencing some invasions, playing multiplayer. Julianne has an ability called Masquerade, which means that she can look like one of the other standard enemies at any time. So ostensibly, if you're a Cole player, you don't know which is Julianne, and they can be therefore stalking you. Except the Cole player is probably just going to shoot everybody.
That was my thought process when I played as Juliana. I'm like, great, I can dress as a guard, but I'm still look like his enemy. I don't look like his friend. He's still going to shoot me when he sees me.
Yeah, I think Jeremy described it as disguising yourself as a pin in a bowling alley.
He did, yes. Which I thought was really, and because it obviously doesn't have any NPCs. Because when I first heard about Masquerade, I thought, oh wow, it's like that Assassin's Creed multiplayer mode where you can sort of turn into a member of like a crowd, somebody in the crowd. No.
And again, if you're trying to minimize kills of non-targets like you are in Hitman, that would also make a lot of sense.
Yeah,
but you're not. Yeah, I feel bad. I've griped a lot because I thought that you guys are going to be the positive ones, and I could just be the negative Nancy griping about the stuff. But now that you've also griped a lot, Marsh, it's going to feel like a bit of a pylon. But I haven't actually mentioned my biggest problem, which is the residuum system, which is I like the concept, which is that most of what you gain in a run is temporary. You're going to lose it all when you die. And then there's this meta resource you gather, which lets you permanently unlock stuff. And each thing has a kind of residuum price. And the better a thing it is, the more residuum you need to be able to save it permanently to your arsenal. And that's all cool. But when you have 3 lives in each run, and when you die, you lose your residuum. But if you can get back to your body, you can pick it back up. And also, if you kill a visionary, they'll give you a huge load of residuum, but it will be wherever they died. And this system completely screwed me. I've been screwed by it twice now in the worst way, just where I've spent, a 2-hour evening of playing the game. I've lost everything I gained in it. And because of if the residuum system didn't exist, I probably, would have gone into it with a different mental attitude. But because it exists, you're thinking you're going to be able to save these things. So when you find something special, you're like, great, I've got enough. This is a cool item, a cool ability. I had something like 3 really interesting, unique guns, 3 new powers. The powers of, I think there's only like 8 of them in the game. Maybe only 7, because I know there's one Colt can't get. And I had 3 new ones I didn't have. And for once, I had a just crazy amount of residuum because I killed multiple visionaries and Juliana. And the last visionary that I was there to kill, So it does a weird thing sometimes where it gives you a quest marker for a visionary, even if you are not supposed to know where they are. And how accurate that is was a question mark for me. And so one of the new powers I'd got is the one that lets you fling people. And it's a fun thing to use. And as I was creeping through, this was a party mission. I'd killed loads of people, including the main visionary I was there to kill. And then there was another one kind of in the back courtyard, or at least so the quest marker said. I was working my way through there. And I was on a sort of high ledge, went out into a courtyard, and in a distant balcony, I could see the quest marker for the visionary was through the building. Like I didn't have line of sight to him. But on the corner of the balcony, there was presumably a guard, just an enemy of some kind. And so I tried fling on him. And I was very far away, so I didn't really expect it to work. So I thought this was a close range power, but it did work, and it flung him into the abyss. And that turned out to be the visionary. And he just fell off the level and died, but died just in hovering in space, because it's just an out of bounds thing. If you've ever like fallen off a level in video games, you at some point your body kind of hits something, like there's an invisible floor there that kills you. He had hit that, and so his unique power, all of the residuum he had, and his unique weapon were all just off in the void there. And that was terrible news. I thought the game would have some kind of insurance policy against that, to avoid like critical things becoming just 100% inaccessible. And because I was still thinking there must be some way around this, it can't just be broken, I crept towards the edge of the level, and I was being incredibly careful because I knew what the stakes were here. I had blink, and so I'm looking for, is there an outcropping down there that I could just blink to and maybe grab this? Like if there's just one little ledge, as long as it's a little bit above the death zone, maybe I can reach down and get the body. Didn't seem likely because it's a pretty sheer cliff face. But in my abundance of caution, I'm like, okay, I'm not going any closer to this edge. I'm safe here. What I'm going to do is use the lean function, because if you lean and press up on the thumbstick, you sort of lean forwards a little bit. Did that, fucking fell off the cliff. The lean caused me to fall off the cliff. And if you fall off the cliff, guess what? Now my fucking body's also in the death zone that can never be recovered from. And that's everything I had from the whole evening's play. I hadn't saved anything until that point, because until the last level, I didn't have that much that was worth saving. And I wanted to save all my residuum up for the stuff I was going to get on this level. I knew I was going to kill 2 visionaries, so 2 big new abilities, 2 unique weapons at least, loads of cool stuff, saved it all up from the whole evening's play, and I had 2 lives left as well. So I respawned, but there's just nothing I can do. Everything I've earned is in the abyss. And because I've been so thorough, because when you die and respawn within a loop, you get, like I say, you get 3 lives. You lose your residuum, but you keep everything else. So I had the abilities and stuff, but there was no way to save them because I'd done such a thorough job of cleaning out the level. I had all of the residuum it was possible to get when I died. And so there's no way to get any more. So I'm just like cursed to have all these cool items and not be able to save them.
That's Dark Souls.
Oh, Tom.
Yeah. So it's funny because it copies a bunch of stuff from roguelikes. And I love roguelikes. And yet the reaction I'm having is what people who don't like roguelikes have to roguelikes, which is, I can't believe you're just going to say, I've lost all that progress. I can't believe you're just going to throw that away for me. And especially in such a sort of like technical kind of way. Like it was in the level, I could see it. I just can't get to it because it's in this weird nonsense space that kills you if you touch it. Yeah, it was very frustrating. And it did occur to me, like, this is probably what Dark Souls is like. And that's why I don't like Dark Souls.
I'm willing to play it more and find out if I like it, but I'm not sure I do at the moment, if I'm honest.
Yeah, that was that disaster for me was like 2-3 nights ago. Then I had another horrible disaster in which there's just a real bullshit trap that even if you see it coming, they just cheat and say, no, you got caught. And that also, if you don't figure it out, leads to your body being in a place that you can never recover from. So I lost everything again that time. And at that point, I was kind of thinking maybe I'm just fucking done with this game. But I persevered and I played it again last night and I had actually a really good session and got a lot of the cool things that I had lost twice over and now have permanently unlocked them. And I'm, excited to use these new powers to take on some of the bits that I haven't done yet. It is strange that there doesn't seem to be more hedging against that risk. Like, I mean, if it was me, I just wouldn't have that lose residuum on death thing, because I don't think what it adds is worth what it takes away. And in fact, massively escalating the stakes in a game like this, I don't think is that positive anyway, because when I finally did go back to this morning target and take them out, this is the run on which I got killed by a skylight. I survived that, but because I've been killed by a skylight, I was on my last life when I got to her hideout, and so I was there to get her power is what I particularly wanted, and got that, took her weapon, and she has this big layer, and it's always been a bit of a mystery to me as to what's going on there. It feels like there's a whole scripted scene there that I've missed every time because I've been in open combat, and so there was lots to explore. But because the stakes were so high, I'm on my last life, and I've got all this residuum and all this stuff, and I'm going to lose it on death. I just didn't explore it because there's poison gas everywhere. At any point, I could just be instantly killed and lose all of this. So I guess I'm just not going to investigate. I guess I'm just going to leave the level to be safe. And so raising the stakes that high is actually not that good of a thing, I don't think, in this kind of game.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like the most kind of exciting, interesting risk reward. It just feels a bit debilitating, really.
Voice acting's nice though.
Yep.
I've only finished my first day, so I'm feeling good. I've enjoyed it, but maybe next week I'll have had more experience, and then I can jump in with the boots. What
powers are you using, Marty?
I'm not far enough in it to have had many. So I have the sort of the double jump and the blink maneuver, but the blink maneuver, as soon as I was given it, was taken away from me in a seemingly unavoidable death sequence, but prior to the point at which you even learn how Residium works.
Oh shit.
Oh.
So I don't know. So it's interesting here you talk about the early game, because I think I must have approached it in a very different order, which maybe is the reason why I found it underwhelming. But it didn't feel to me that I could have approached it in any other order.
Well, should we put a spoiler up and say, because I want to understand what happened to you, because yeah.
Well, it's happened to me a bunch of times where it's sort of introduced things to you, like getting new weapons, and then it's taken them away by killing you in unavoidable ways. I haven't died in combat once yet.
But in what way did you die after that?
The first visionary, when you imbue yourself with Residium for the first time, that process kills you.
I see.
And it's slightly frustrating because the process of killing that visionary gives you like the mother load of all trinkets, just a huge number of things which potentially can really change your experience. And it's just like, oh, you like them? Oh, psych, take them away.
Oh, is this sort of a Metroid style kind of, this is what you'll spend the game kind of earning back?
Yeah, and also the first time you encounter Juliana, who drops a power, it immediately goes to the night sequence, and then it's the next day and you've lost it.
I see.
And it's just weird that is your introduction to it. I know that they need to introduce you to the idea of losing your stuff, but also they need to introduce the idea of stuff. Like I would like to have explored what it was like to have that power for more than the minute that it took me to exit the level,
So was that where you got Blink from? Was it Juliana?
Yes, the first encounter with Juliana.
I think I got something different. I think I got like the rage power or something.
Oh, interesting. I got Blink too.
I might be wrong.
I mean, for me, I am too, I can't really, powers are nice and things, but I've got too much else on my mind because I've got this new space to explore. I'm still kind of getting to grips with the weapons and whether I should be firing them a lot or whether I should be hiding away. I feel quite agile as it is. I don't really feel that I need Blink. I barely use Blink actually after getting it for the remainder of that day because there was lots of places I could already get to. It was only saving me a few seconds of going the long way round in terms of where I was going and things. For that period, I had enough to go on that I haven't really felt that I need powers to kind of to juice stuff up yet. I mean, I know I will do in the future, and I'm keen to get that back if I lose it, sort of thing. But I don't. There's so much going on at that point because it's still I haven't got to the residuum stuff and that kind of thing. It's interesting. I don't know how I'll feel about it when I get to it.
because you only get 2 slots for powers, and I was actually thinking that blink was so essential that it was almost like you only get 1 slot for powers. Because I've got the one I liked other than blink was a stealthy one, just makes you mostly invisible, and it's been a nice like a kind of stealth cushion where if I'm sneaking through somewhere and somebody happens to start seeing me, I can just turn that on, and then that gives me a little bit of time to figure out, wait, who is that? Where are they seeing me from? And where can I go now? But because I like that so much, now that I'm unlocking new powers, I'm like, well, I do want to try the other fun ones, but I kind of need both the stealth one and I need blink, so there isn't really any room for them.
They might get you out of your sniping from a distance. Right.
Yeah. But I mean, like, yeah, the stealthy approach that's quite repetitive is one thing, but then also the action approach has been quite repetitive too, in terms of like, I just hide in a corner and mow everyone down as they come in.
Yeah, they do like to kind of walk out in front of your gunfire. I had the first time that you encounter Julianne in Cole's apartment, or you talk to her and then she attacks you, and at that point you're in his apartment. I'd set up a turret. I thought I'm going to set up a turret in here, looking out through the way I got in, just in case if enemies come, because I think something's going to happen after the cutscene at this point in the story. And lo and behold, it did, and my turret killed her. But like everybody was so happy just to walk in front of this bullets mowing them down.
Oh yeah, I should have mentioned the turrets because I fucking love them. Love to hack turrets, love to carry them around with me, love to set up death zones and lure everyone into them. It's great.
Well, I was going to say that the turrets and the monitors, the CCTV things, they're just a really minor inconvenience. They just mean that I've got to stop and
especially the cameras.
Hold
I don't
down
really
the hack
know.
thing. Yeah, like I assumed that it would be, you'd have 5 seconds or something to get past, but no, they're hacked forever. It was just a kind of like a minor inconvenience, and they're kind of irrelevant, completely irrelevant.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but the cameras don't even cause security systems to aggro against your enemy once you've hacked them, right?
No.
Yeah.
They just don't do anything. And I think you can also just shoot them.
Oh, really?
It's funny that hiding in a hole and letting every enemy come to me, and then I shoot each one as they come in, is really boring to me. But setting up a turret in a hole and then luring everyone in so the turret shoots them is fucking amazing. So satisfying.
Well, it's because you don't have to do it, you see. You can stand there motionless
just like one level of automation.
It's so much more interesting.
Maybe I can get like an auto hotkey routine to just click my mouse when an enemy walks in the room, and it'll feel just as good.
I kind of wonder if the game would be better if you did lose all of your weapons and you never had any way of keeping them, because at least that way you would be forced to use different guns each run when you went to a new place and the same equipment wasn't available to you. Because I'm really struggling to put down the sort of the silenced nail gun thing. That just seems to be easy.
Should we do questions?
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad someone said it.
We have but one question this week. It comes from Paddy from Dublin, who writes to us to ask, do you know of games that were designed or play tested during the initial prototype and development phase with pen and paper? Could tactical breach wizards be played by moving paper icons on a paper grid? Or do you need that stupid game properly running to find the fun? I put the stupid in there. He didn't insult your game. I did.
Thanks.
Could any CCGs have worked well as printed card games? Or does it get too unwieldy for a human to keep track of all the rules and statuses in effect? Thanks! Paddy from Dublin. It's so fortunate that you're here this week, Tom.
Yeah. I didn't paper prototype Tactical Breach Wizards, but I did at one point do sort of the equivalent of that on an iPad, where I'd drawn out a map and I put little wizard sprites on different layers and like drag them around to as if moving them in the game, to kind of as a cheap way of sort of seeing, like, if you had an ability that did this, like if you had an ability where like you can charge an enemy and when you hit them, they move back the number of spaces that you traveled. How does that play out in a map of this size? Does this Does this work on an 8x8 grid, or does it never really come into effect? And some other stuff like that. I usually find that it's not worth it because it's not that easy. I mean, that was already the easier version versus cutting things out on paper and moving them around. And I think that you're going to have to build the basics of that system anyway. And so once you've done that, building the individual abilities to test those is not very hard. And, if the grid size is wrong, I can change the grid size with a single change to a line of code. So I usually find that the things that you want to iterate on are not that hard to do in code. And building the code in the first place is a lot of work, but you're probably going to have to do that anyway. And the big decisions that it would have been really useful to figure out before I started making the game, just like how does time work? Because for a long time, I was planning to have simultaneous execution where you all act at once. And that ended up not really working, just being too hard to communicate to the player and too many edge cases, too many surprising consequences that surprising in a bad way. We thought, why did that happen? But there was no way to find that out with a paper prototype, I don't think, because moving all the paper simultaneously would be difficult. And it so often comes down to nitty gritty things like that. Like, on paper, that system sounded fine. And then in practice, you look at it and think, God, this is just confusing. And okay, we can create some UI to spell it out and list who's going to act in when, but it's always going to be UI that isn't the game that you're going to have to look at instead. And I also tried interleaved turns, which is what XCOM Chimera Squad does, where each person has their place in the turn order, not rather than it being team 1 then team 2. It's this person, then that person, then this person, then that person. And again, I found that just needing that UI on screen just meant that all the really important information was living in the UI and not just visually on the map. And again, I don't really think I could have figured that out with paper prototyping. But I know a lot of people do use it. And in terms of CCGs, I think it's interesting that playing Magic is really interesting coming from a digital card game perspective, because I was surprised how much Magic has mechanics that just don't really work in physical card games. Like there's all these cards that just, this creates a 1/1 orc or something. You're like, why do I get the 1/1 orc? I've just got to put some tokens on I've just got to find some pennies or something and put them on the table. It doesn't have the material for you to do that. You've got to figure something out just to keep note of it. And that thing can potentially get buffed. It could get more health or more damage or something. And you'd have to just track that in whatever way you see fit.
Yes, it gets so unwieldy, doesn't it?
That's all stuff that I would have said, you obviously can't do that in a physical card game, but if you're making a digital one, that's great, because then the computer can keep track of all that stuff for you. But no, apparently people have been happily doing it in physical card games for a long time.
So I think there's part of Magic's appeal in some ways is the sort of if it was rendered by a computer, like these kind of weird chain effects and things you get in Magic, rendered on a computer, it kind of lacks some of the magic because it's got this emergent sort of feel where, because you're having to analyze it yourself, minute by minute on your tabletop, each chain reaction leading to this, and now that means this, and now that means that, creates these moments of cool drama and things that, I think you lose when you get it onto a computer, which is, I keep wondering about, like, why is it still a very, very popular game when you could just play it on your PC? And I think it's actually sort of building out those kind of mad moments.
Yeah, it's interesting because I can also see the other perspective, which is Slay the Spire. I feel like most mechanics in Slay the Spire you could do perfectly well with paper. I was thinking about like the defects orbs. He's got all these orbs around him, and you can have up to 12 of them. I think it is. Each one has to reflect your current focus value. So if your focus goes up, all of their damage goes up, or all of their protection goes up, or whatever. But also some orbs have individual stats as well. Like a dark orb can be kind of existed for a long time and therefore have a lot of damage stored up in it, whereas another dark orb doesn't. And representing all of that with tokens, you could definitely do it. But then going leaning into that build where like I just want loads and loads of orbs and I want to charge them all up in all these different ways, I feel like that build would just be a pain in the ass to do. You'd be thinking like, oh, I could do that, but it's going to be a lot of moving tokens around and they're going to fall off and it's just going to be
But
really
you're also
fiddly.
doing like 10 times, like what in a game, like in a single battle, how many rounds do they tend to go? Like 10, 15, 20? You're kind of moving these little tokens around kind of 20 times, slowly getting more and more of them every time.
Yeah, and stuff like zero cost decks where you're getting all these cards that don't cost you anything. One of the pleasures of that in Slay the Spire is you're just flinging those cards out. You're just like claw, claw, claw. Like the fact that you're playing them so fast is part of the fun of it, and also they're being created during the match in some cases, and that would be tricky to do with paper. And so yeah, I definitely think like the feel of different decks, but would be different between paper and digital. But you might be right that like a lot of these difficult cases where it would get really awkward with paper are the cases where your deck has got kind of out of control and crazy, and maybe just knowing that how crazy it is and how powerful it is would make the busy work more fun. It would be like, okay, I'm having to do a lot of work here, but it's because my deck is insane.
Yeah, and I think also like a computer doesn't quite know how to deliver moments of kind of like drama where, you know, you've put this card down and you put that card down and the other player has realized that if they've got the third card, then they're in real trouble. And, you know, everybody's waiting for that moment and they're kind of drawing on suspense. Like the Magic the Gathering Online, that's what it's called, isn't it? The one that's the leading one at the moment. Can't remember what it's called. Anyway, that game does do a little bit is able to know how to do little doof sounds for particularly strong cards and kind of, you know, and little physics effects and things, but it can't do the same moments of drama that two players just holding bits of paper can do. Yeah.
One thing I could see it working really well for actually is like a meta layer, like a campaign map or something. If you're making an RTS, and you have an idea for how you want conquering territories and stuff to work, you could quite happily lay that out on paper and then play it, where each time you invade a territory, you go play your actual, you know, digital RTS that you've partly built. And the results of that, you then record on your big paper map of what the campaign screen is going to look like. And that actually would be easier than building a campaign screen, because that's a case where the whole system isn't built and isn't core to your game and might not need to be built. You know, maybe you don't want to do a thing where it's all these big contiguous territories across a whole country. Maybe you want something where it's more like a grid, or an empty field where you're building buildings or something like that. I know actually Into the Breach went through loads of iterations of its strategy map, and it landed on something that's very simple compared to a lot of things they tried. And I bet those are things that you could test on paper.
Yeah. I think that's all we've got time for this evening in this episode. You can hang out with us and our community on our Discord channel. You can find the link for our Discord channel on our website at crateandcrowbar.com. We do recommend that you go, because then if you do go to our Discord channel and join it, you'll manage to meet and interact with a series of very nice people who listen to our pod and have cool views and things. It's a nice community. If you have a question for a future episode, send it to us at questions@crateandcrowbar.com. We're also asking at the moment for ideas that you might have about sort of spicing up this element or that little element of the show, because we're kind of thinking about new formats and things, not scary stuff, not at all, but you know, just we don't get as many questions as we used to, because I think we've done all of the questions. So if you have ideas for interactive elements in this final section of the show, ping it to us at questions at Crate and Crowbar. We are on Twitter at Crate and Crowbar. You can also listen to the show on YouTube, where you'll also find our various spin-off projects. The show is kindly funded by our Patreon backers. If you'd like to find out more about supporting our podcast and its spin-offs, visit patreon.com/Crate and Crowbar. Okay. Yes, I've been Alex Wiltshire.
I've been Tom Francis.
I've been Marsh Davis.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks
listening, everyone.
for listening, everyone.